Hi, this is Emily Saliers from Indigo Girls, and you're listening to Rainbow Country.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, the new documentary, Much Ado About Dying, from award-winning filmmaker Simon Chambers. Plus, we find out about the 21st annual Female Eye Film Festival. That and so much more in episode 362, so stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hello, my name is Conchita.
And I'm Barbecue.
And my name is Hardcora. And we are the B Girls.
You're listening to
Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT FM in Toronto and now proudly in syndication on 12 outlets across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. The Yukon, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the east coast of Canada in Newfoundland, Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together, we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast on Podomatic.com's Gay and Lesbian chart, as well as being recognized as Canada's #1 LGBT podcast on Feedspot.com. So today, award-winning British filmmaker Simon Chambers joins me to talk about his latest documentary, Much Ado About Dying, where Simon finds his life drastically interrupted when he is called back to London from India to care for his retired bohemian gay actor uncle, David. Plus, Leslie Ann Coles, founder and executive director of Female Eye Film Festival. She fills us in on the 21st annual Canadian Film Festival that's geared towards showcasing films by female and female-identified filmmakers. Plus, in hour 2, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house, and on today's episode, I'm featuring some classic house, some Ashley McIsaac, and more. All that lies ahead as we start Journey 362 through Rainbow Country. But first up, a special shout out to Peter B., who listens to Rainbow Country on CKCU-FM in Ottawa. And Peter B. commented on episode 360 that featured the story behind the making of Martha and the Muffins, Echo Beach. And Peter B. writes, quote, "Cool. Had the random event to witness Martha and the Muffins live at some hall at Ontario Art School way back before they were even known. Pretty rough, punkish, yet super energy." Unquote. Peter B. in Ottawa, thank you for sharing. Up next, the Rainbow Country Bookstore. Today, award-winning writer and author Michael Sadowski reads from his memoir, Men I've Never Been. A book that deals with manhood, sexuality, and conformity. And by the way, Men I've Never Been is available wherever you get your favorite books. And on Amazon.ca, the book has a rating of 4.7 out of 5 stars.
I didn't have a crush on Mr. Farello, my sixth grade teacher, but I really wanted him to like me. And Kevin Rice swooped in on this fact like a bird of prey from day one. A short, scrawny kid with pale skin and a mop of dark brown hair, Kevin was one of the least threatening-looking boys in my class. If he were a dog, he'd have been the runt of the litter. But what Kevin lacked in physical stature, he made up for in intensity of hatred, all of it apparently directed toward me. "Oh, Mr. Farello, I know," Kevin mimicked my voice and hand gestures as I answered a question on the first day of school. Then, under his breath, in a sneer I would recognize over the telephone to this day, one more word: faggot. I'd certainly been called names before, and I'd heard the F word muttered by boys in elementary school under circumstances that often made me wonder if it had to do with me. But Kevin's delivery was different. It was bile in it, something primal, diseased, even sexual. It turned me inside out, brought my faggot guts to the surface for all to see. And it was constant, 20, 30, maybe 40 times a day. Compared to Kevin, the boys in elementary school had been mere amateurs. Even if I kept my hand down to avoid Kevin's glare, he found ways to assault my not even formed yet sexuality every day, every hour. We got a lot of group work in Mr. Farello's class, which meant a lot of moving around the room and a lot of opportunities for Kevin to sidle up next to me. "You fag, you fucking faggot, you queer, you're a fucking queer faggot." Pretty soon it didn't matter what words Kevin used or what order he put them in. He had me where he wanted me. Now I was much more than the sissy I'd walked into the room determined not to be. I was the class faggot. "Michael, where are your sneakers?" "I'm doing the broad jump, so I thought I could wear shoes today." "No, you may not. Now you just step right over there." Mrs. Finch, my gym teacher, was pointing to an area in the middle of the playground, far from where the whole rest of the fifth grade was standing. "You cannot participate in field day if you're not wearing sneakers." Not looking at any of the other kids, I stepped out of the line and clip-clopped toward the region of social Siberia where Mrs. Finch had ordered me to go. After a minute or two, getting everyone dispatched for warm-ups, she left the group to come and deal with me. "Now, why don't you have your sneakers?" she asked, in a sigh that reminded me a little bit of my mother's. "I don't know," I mumbled, staring at the ground. "I just forgot them." "You forgot your sneakers? On field day? What are you, some kind of a sissy? You must be." Mrs. Finch let her eyes and her words bore into me for a few more endless-seeming seconds. Then, finally done with me, she did a 180 on her kids and turned away. She marched back to kick off the festivities and left me, the field day exile, in the middle of the playground. As I watched her go, I stood stunned for a minute or two. Then I walked over to a high metal stool someone had left alongside the building. I sat down and felt the weight of my heavy leather shoes pulling down on my feet, which didn't quite touch the ground. Soon I heard the faint screech of Mrs. Finch's whistle from the other side of the playground. Field day was starting not 50 yards away, on the grassy field across the asphalt from where I sat. But the longer I sat there, the more it all just receded into the distance. The sprints, the broad jump, the kids now part of a world from which I felt completely separate. I was deep inside myself now, Mrs. Finch's words booming over and over, in a now familiar echo that filled my head, my chest, my entire body. Right around the corner from the row of bushes where Sheila Feldman had branded me a sissy in first grade, Mrs. Finch had issued the final verdict. 5 years of elementary school, of efforts to cut that word and everything it meant out from inside me, had come down to this. At some point, it felt like hours, but was probably only about 45 minutes. The bell rang. Field day was over. I have no idea who won. In my junior year at Northwestern, I invented another self, and he finished college for me. He had a pretty good run, but there were cracks in his armor, especially when it came to women. The dates he went on all felt prematurely aborted, certainly to him, and no doubt even more so to the women he courted. He made a valiant effort with Natalie, a year behind him in the theater program. Natalie was pretty and sweet, with wide brown eyes and a buoyant air, the perfect casting choice for the role. And she seemed dazzled by his status as an upperclassman who had performed on the Northwestern main stage. Everything went fine on their first date. She even seemed happy with the quick kiss he planted on her lips as he dropped her off in front of her dorm. But as their second date approached, a weight started to bear down on him. He knew a quick peck on the lips at the end of the night was only going to cut it for so long. This wasn't middle school, where going with someone meant holding hands in the hallway between classes and going on the occasional date to the bowling alley. There were expectations. And the usually sunny, I'm nice to everybody Natalie seemed testy by the end of their third date, when the quick peck on the lips was still all he had to deliver. What's wrong with me, she probably wondered. Does he even like me? He wanted to do more, or at least he wanted to want to do more. So he called Natalie to give it another try. He left a message with her roommate. She left a message back, and then he called again and left another message. Message after message, but now they were a week apart instead of just a few days, until it was obvious there wasn't going to be another date. He felt the weight lift off his chest. For at least a few more weeks, until the next eligible potential girlfriend came along, he wouldn't have to go out on any dates at all. And he wouldn't have to wonder what he was going to do when they were over.
Hi, everybody. This is Gino Vanelli. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, the Female Eye Film Festival. Leslie Ann Coles, hi, how are you?
I am very well. How are you?
I am well. I'm better now that I'm speaking to you, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially to talk about the 21st Annual Female Eye Film Festival. The 21st Annual. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, 21 years. It's kind of pinched myself. It's gone very quickly.
And so you should.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's start with the basics. Female Eye Film Festival. What is this film festival all about?
Well, I founded the festival in 2001. Because I was attending international film festivals and I noted there weren't very many women or female identifying directors. Like we were very scarce in the international film festival world at the festival level. And it raised a question for me, and it was, are there so few women directors, or are there films not getting programmed? And so I launched an event in 2001 to look at that, so we could kind of take a look at that. And we didn't have a long time to reach into community, but we did have 42 films, and more than half of them were from local filmmakers, because we didn't have the broad reach that we have now internationally. So it was pretty astonishing to see there were so many independent filmmakers in the GTA. I had no idea, but anyway, so that's where it started. That's why we're here. We've always been advocating for inclusion, diversity, representation. Like for 20 years, we've been on the front line of trying to address the disparity in the industry, especially in the independent film world. So that's kind of where it started and why it started. Mm-hmm.
So in 2023, what can audiences expect from the Female Eye Film Festival? What sort of films, genres of films do you have lined up for 2023?
We have so many. We have quite an eclectic program of features, shorts, including animation, experimental, foreign films, films from across North America. And we have a really great late night thrills and chills program, both Friday night and Saturday night, women working in the space. I don't know if you know, there's a fabulous film called Spoonful of Sugar by Mercedes Bryce Morgan, who's LGBTQ. She's really cool, out of LA, and she's joining us. We have My Old Gals, which is brilliant. It's about an older couple of women who were lovers for years, and then one of them develops Alzheimer's, and it's just such a beautiful film where they come together. The one seeks the other out. She escapes the long-term care facility. It's quite brilliant and well executed. And then the other is Milk and Honey and Milk by Dash Donato out of the US. And the other is called Listen to Her, and it's from China. And it's about a young man who's in, obviously, where he's living and his community and his family and what he's deals with. And he's actually institutionalized for being gay. And he runs away. And the story is about him living on his own and being close to his mother, and living in the same building, but hiding out. Like, it's a very interesting, well-crafted story. But these three films, they really struck me as very unique and different and beautiful and authentic. We do have an Indigenous filmmaker series that's been strong since 2008. And we're still very committed to that program. And we've also mentored and produced, 26 films, or 46 actually, but 26 of them were debut filmmakers that were Indigenous. So we've done that over the years since 2009. And then we show the films at the Female Eye Film Festival. It's pretty eclectic, this collection of films this year.
And this is held in Toronto at the Hot Docs Ted Rogers Cinema. And how? And
July. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say July 26th we open, and we run through to July 30th.
And so, when you say female and female identified individuals, are you seeking out film? Are these films by directors, by writers that are female and trans women?
Yeah.
Or so talk to me about that. Like, when you say these are female films, what aspect would be covered, let's say, by an individual? Like, is it like, do all the films have to be directed by females and a trans female, that sort of thing? Or is it like co-written? Like, so talk to me about that.
Okay, that's a great question. So to the first question, yes, directed by. So there's a lot of international female film festivals that have sprouted up over the last decade in particular. And we've always been committed to showcasing films. They have to be directed by a female. That's one thing. But what we found over the years is that most of the women, or most of the females who direct their films, and we're talking independent films, they also write their films. And many of them have hands in the production of their film as producers. So 90% of the films that come to the Female Eye, and I mean that are submitted to the festival annually, are written and directed by the filmmaker, which is kind of interesting. Now, we do have a script development program that is open to both men. It is open to men. And as long as their screenplay features a female protagonist, and that was to address on screen the lack of real on-screen presence of females in starring roles. We found that a lot of the films that we were seeing in the early years of the festival were, always women were sort of in a secondary role, or they were very stereotyped, typecast. They were, you'd see a 21-year-old woman on the arm of a 61-year-old male type of, which is nothing wrong with that. But what I found is that what we've found over the years is that women have a particular lens through which they write and they craft story and they represent females on screen. And I think that's what's really exciting about the festival, is that it's more authentic storytelling from my perspective. And I wasn't used to it in the early years. I wasn't used to seeing wizened faces on screen. I wasn't used to seeing certainly trans actors on screen, or hearing stories from the voices of the community. And There's a Cuthand's a perfect example. She's Indigenous. We've been showing her films for years. Gail Morris is another one. Liz Marshall.
She's been on the show.
She's fabulous. And we have so many great directors who we've shown over the years from I think we showed her short film Wolves in the first year. I think it was 15 minutes long. And I think we presented that in 2001 or 2003. And since then, we've showcased her work. And she was actually an honorary director and the recipient of a Best in the Biz tribute and the Honorary Director Award back in 2018.
So this may sound like an ignorant question to ask, but I have to ask it. But I understand the female aspect of filmmaking, and I'm sure that the talent pool for that would be deep. But when it comes to say trans women, how are you finding that? Is the talent pool for that is it deep enough for you to sort of like be able to mind?
No.
So talk to me about that.
Yeah, no, certainly not. I would say we're in terms of mining films for the film festival. And I like that word because we receive, now thousands of submissions, but yeah, we're still seeing a scarcity there in terms of, and I don't know if it's because they're not submitting, those filmmakers aren't submitting to the female eye. There's other festivals that are more specifically dedicated to the community, but I feel that they should be bold and brave. And if they're out there, I would really encourage them to submit to all international film festivals, from the top tier A-listers, Sundance, TIFF, and beyond, Berlin, Venice, and to all of the film festivals. And I'm wondering if, I wonder about that. That's a really good question. But yeah, no, we're still not seeing the number of films that we'd like to see. It's slim pickings. Let's put it that way. It's
I can
slim.
imagine.
We might, yeah.
Is there a virtual aspect to Female Eye Film Festival, especially since the pandemic?
In 2021, we were fully virtual. We pivoted online at TIFF Digital Bell Lightbox, and Encore Plus supported the festival. So we had a lot of all Canadian films streaming there. And we had all our panels virtually. So we had the Directors Roundtable. We had Meet the Guilds and Agencies. We had, I think we had a documentary, or we really grew actually our panels and our panel discussions and our industry sessions. And this year, now we're catching up on that. So now we're going to be seeing a lot of things popping up online, like the roundtable discussion is going to be virtual this year. So we're still, it's a good question because we were literally in discussion about this last week. It's like, are we going to produce these panels? Are they going to be virtual, or are we going to host them live? And I think we're leaning more into a virtual because they can live on our YouTube channel and we can engage more of the delegates who are the festival participants who aren't actually able to attend the festival. Right. So, we'll be definitely producing some virtual elements.
And what about screenings? Will there be any virtual screenings?
No, all the screenings are going to be in person this year.
Okay. So Leslie Ann, you are the founder, you are the artistic director, the executive director of Female Eye Film Festival. And in 2001, your debut film, In the Refrigerator, I guess it helped to inspire you while your film was doing the film festival circuit scene, to help to inspire this film festival, which is now like in its 21st year?
It's actually in its 22nd year, but I didn't produce it in 2004. Long story short, marriage. But anyway, I just didn't have capacity. But that year we did a lot of outreach. We started doing the mentoring and all of that. So what was the question? Sorry.
Well, I was just getting to that. So here's my last question for you.
Mhm.
You created this back in 2001. In 2023, here we are, the 21st annual, the 22nd.
Mhm.
What do you hope audiences come away with after they've experienced a Female Eye Film Festival in person in Toronto?
Well, I hope they come back, and I hope they track the filmmakers, like they keep their eyes out for the filmmakers that were presenting at the festival, because they're staying longer. You know, in the early years, we would see some fantastic films by first-time filmmakers or second-time filmmakers, and then we wouldn't see them again. So it was a clear indication that the industry didn't support them. They had to find an alternate career, or they had to become crew members, but now what we're seeing is the filmmakers are staying. Like Liz Marshall, she just keeps coming back, bigger and better every project. So I would hope that they see some really great, thought-provoking, inspiring film, and that they follow the filmmakers, and hopefully they'll return to the Female Eye Film Festival and become part of our audience. That would be really, really great. And you were asking me a question about my early years with the festival and in the refrigerator. I just finished a film, actually, The Curtain, which I wrote and directed, that was fully funded by the Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council. And then in 2019, I did a documentary. But what really influenced the festival was my experience attending international film festivals. So I went to one, I think, in Texas, and they had a really great script development program for writers. And there were others that were competitive. And I thought, yes, we should be competitive, because filmmakers they love awards, and they're really helpful for bolstering their careers and moving them forward. So there were definitely a lot of things in the early years and in my own life as a filmmaker that continue to inform and inspire the festival, for sure.
Leslie Ann Coles, I have to say thank you for your time. Well said, well done, well produced with your film festival. Well done.
Thank you. And thank you for your interest and for having me on your show.
By the way, some queer films to look out for include My Old Gals, Honey and Milk, and Listen to Her. The Female Eye Film Festival runs in person at the Hot Docs Ted Rogers Cinema in Toronto, July 26th to the 30th. For all things festival, thefemaleeyefilmfestival.com.
Hi, this is Amanda Marshall, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
This is Bernard Fraser of Canadian synth-pop band Church of Trees, and if you're in the Ottawa area on Friday, July 28th, come hang with us at Bar Robo for a kick-ass night of electro-fueled pop. Doors open at 8 p.m. Tickets at eventbrite.ca. And Toronto folks will be at the legendary El Macombo on Saturday, September 16th, opening for our pals Slave to the Square Wave. Come join us, bring your friends, it's gonna be a hell of a party. Tickets at elmacombo.com.
Hi, I'm Agnes. My new record, Magic Still Exists, is out now. You are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, Much Ado About Dying.
When life's good, it's very, very good. When it's bad, it's horrid.
What do you do if your uncle says he's dying and you're the only person in the world that can look after him?
I'm just saying, I think it's OTT to buy 4 of everything.
Don't think like that.
Have you got any more of these big ones, please?
1, 2, 3, 4 is OTT, be careful. But if you go 6, 7, then you're buying too much stuff. Ooh, that was my finger.
It wasn't.
You know, bossy uncle and
bossy nephew.
And bossy nephew, absolutely. All the worlds have stayed, and all the men and women merely players.
What do you do when you're dragged into a mess that's exactly like the Shakespeare plays that he used to act in?
Which of you, shall we say, doth love us most?
I'm a bubbly person.
And he wants to give his kingdom away to a hot anthropology student he's fallen in love with.
He received £25,000 from you.
I'm intuitional about money. I don't really think of figures.
Everyone!
Why was I always the boring one, standing at the edge, never doing anything right?
Because everybody keeps saying, put him in a home, put him in a home.
I know they do.
And
Thank
you
God
don't want to be in a home.
Nor do I need to be in a home.
And then King Lear had his storm.
Yes. It's like going on the most wonderful holiday without any of the bother of packing.
Simon Chambers, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great.
Okay, so Simon, I want to start our interview this way. So, and I said these same words to Academy Award-winning stunt coordinator Robert Nagel, who did the stunts for a little film called Ford v Ferrari. He was on the show, and he's an Oscar winner. And I said these exact same words to him that I'm about to say to you. So, Simon, I've seen your film, and I have to say I did not like your film, Simon. I did not like it.
Okay.
I loved your film.
I
laughed.
Oh, very good.
I cried. I ruined my makeup. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So Simon, I have to say thank you for being here to have your voice, to have your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially to talk about Much Ado About Dying. This is your award-winning documentary. Talk to me about the story that you're telling in this documentary, Much Ado About Dying. What is this? What are you getting at in this film?
So it's a story, really, a personal story of my something that happened to me. I was living in India and I was making films over there, and my uncle David, who I'm quite close to, who is a gay actor in his about 85 years old, and the actor part's very important because he's he's sort of very dramatic, a real drama queen. So he keeps ringing me up while I'm in India trying to make a movie, and he says, Simon, you've got to come home. I'm dying. You've got to come home. Now, I had some friends in London that were keeping an eye on him, and they'd say, look, he's okay. Don't worry. He's fine. But at a certain point, they said, no, you better come back. I think it's bad. So I came back home thinking that I would just be looking after him and being there for him while he, the last couple of months of his life. Anyway, 5 years later, I had, I realized he had no intention of dying whatsoever. And so the film is really about all the ups and downs of looking after somebody in the last few years of their life. And the title may have put a few people off, Much Ado About Dying. But actually, it sounds a bit macabre, but it's actually a very life-affirming film, I think, and that's because Uncle David was an incredibly positive and funny guy. I mean, in the film, he burns his house down, for example, and his response is, "Oh my God, I'm liberated now."
So you're living in India, you're working on a documentary while you're there, you get these messages, and you decide to move back to the UK. For yourself, how difficult, how challenging was that decision to make to move from India back to the UK?
Well, I mean, it was something I didn't really want to do, but it's something I felt I owed to David because we are both the kind of outsiders of our family. So I'm bisexual myself, and David's gay. And in a way, I knew that there was nobody else there that would really be able to look after him. And I knew he was living on his own in a tumble down house. So it really, that's when, I suppose as well, because I'd been living in India for a while, the people there have a very different idea about family. And I think the idea that you do look after the older people in your family is still a very sort of big cultural thing over there. And then what happened when I came back was I found that he was that everything in his life was, there were lots of things that needed sorting out, like his finances and relationships he had with other people that I thought weren't particularly healthy, and I just wanted to try and sort all that out, and then I thought I'd go back. So it wasn't that difficult because I thought I'd always go back, but then I never did go back, and it changed my life in a weird way, because I'm still living in London now, and David's he died in January 2020.
So your documentary is about your uncle, a family member. You're also a filmmaker. You're filming this. These scenes where your uncle is vulnerable. I would assume that would be difficult. And so the question is, you're a professional filming these scenes with your uncle, but yet you're also part of his family. So what sort of switch do you have to turn on and off when because you're filming this footage of him in a nursing home or with a walker or what have you, and you have to be behind the camera, but yet you're a family member. So did you have to turn on and off any switches to be able to capture this footage and remain sane?
Not really when it came to being a filmmaker and being a family member, because really I never intended to make a film out of this. It was Uncle David, because he was an actor, who always said to me, "Simon, you should get your camera. Why don't you film me? Let's do because actors tend to be very playful in life, I think. They love performing, they like being in front of the camera. And he was never happier than when he was in front of the camera. And so that became part of our playfulness between each other.
Right.
That I would turn the camera on and we would mess about and improvise in front of the camera. And in a way that it became a blur between when the camera was on and when the camera was off. And also, it was just a very small little camera, and it was just me and him. It wasn't a big film crew or anything. And so it was really two men messing about with the camera.
Mm-hmm. Almost making home movies.
Exactly, yeah. And I didn't realize it would turn into a movie that people would want to watch, because I thought it wouldn't be very interesting to other people. But then suddenly his life became incredibly dramatic and all these things happened to him. And then I thought, wow, this is a movie, because it's about things that other people who care for older people will be able to relate to. And it's something that I hadn't really seen movies about before and people talking about very much.
So your Uncle David has had quite a cast of characters around him. Rodrigo, can you tell us who Rodrigo is?
So, Rodrigo is a name I've given to a real person who is very present in the movie, but we never see him. And so this was a young guy who sort of befriended David in a way. Then David ended up giving him lots of money. So he gave him in total about £25,000, which would be what, maybe 40,000 Canadian dollars. And I didn't know what to do about this. I mean, I talked to David and my uncle David, and he said, well, I want to do this. You know, what's your problem? And one way I thought, yeah, you're right. But then Rodrigo didn't ever show up. And, you know, David kept phoning and saying, when are you coming over? And then Rodrigo would always be too busy. And so I got the sense that, in a way, Rodrigo was taking advantage of Uncle David. And I tried to stop that by talking to Rodrigo. And Rodrigo just sort of said, well, you know, David wants to give me all this money, so why shouldn't he? I'd known... Yeah,
do you think Rodrigo, ultimately, do you think that he cared for your uncle, or do you think that he was using your uncle?
It was a very difficult thing for me to kind of get my head around, but I do think in the end he was abusing my uncle.
He was abusing your uncle David?
I felt so, yeah.
Okay.
Because and what made me think that was that Rodrigo wasn't really ever available when David said, you know, oh, I need could you come over and could you do this? Could you just come and see me? And I remember, because I was going to see David, you know, 3-4 times a week to look after him. And he'd always just say, oh, Rodrigo's just too busy. He can't come. And I don't know, I felt on one level how amazing to be 85. Maybe this is something many of us might like. And to feel this sort of great attraction for, you know, somebody else, to be, you know, almost to be like a kind of teenage love or something. Maybe many of us would like to have that when we're 85 years old. But it also felt problematic because it felt very one way, and you know, if only Rodrigo had actually been there more for David, then, you know, it would have been great.
Then there's, I think it's Zibby and Beata.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Again, were they good for your Uncle David, or do you think that they were hurting your Uncle David, or neglecting him?
No, I think they were very good in many ways. And I think the problem was that, so, you know, obviously people can feel very lonely when they get older. And so, I mean, one of the things that I've talked to many other people with elderly parents about is how you know, people like, say, the gardeners might come round and the older person might say, oh, don't worry about the garden, just come in and have coffee and chat to me. And so I think they were very useful, as was Rodrigo for David in that sense. What happened with them, though, was that they all decided to move into the house together, and that they'd look after David. But then, in fact, and I thought at that stage, wow, this is good because I can get on with some other things in my life. But actually, nothing got any easier, and if anything, it got harder because they did look after him in some ways, but in other ways they didn't. And felt as though he was very neglected. And so it didn't work out. And so that's when David had this thing about not wanting to go into a care home at any cost. You know, it's like, over my dead body, do I go into a care home? And then they had all these plans about rebuilding the house, which burned down in a fire. And then I sort of thought it's just not going to work out because David wasn't really being looked after, and he kept complaining that he was too cold and he was hungry and things like that. So in the end, with my sisters, we've actually sort of kidnapped David and took him off to a care home for elderly actors, thinking that he was going to hate it. But in fact, he absolutely loved it. And he met loads of other actors, elderly retired actors there, and wasn't ever lonely ever again.
So your Uncle David is gay, was gay. You earlier in our conversation, you said that you are bisexual. Did the two of you ever talk about that, about that connection that you both share?
Oh, we talked about it a lot. Yeah. And David, in fact,
did he ever share any of his early experiences?
Yeah, he was very open about those with me. And he told me about the first time that he met a guy that he felt attracted to, which was, I think, when he was about 20 years old. And also, of course, most of his life, it was illegal to be gay for most of his life. And I think he only came out when he was about 55. I remember him telling the family about it long after he'd sort of told me. And so we did talk about that a lot. And he all said to me, he thought we're all bisexual. So he was very kind of open and, thoughtful.
So Simon, in the documentary, you said that you came out at 23 and then you went back into the closet at 36. My question is, what happened to you at 36?
So I went in my 20s. I guess I had a few girlfriends in my teens, and then I came out in my early 20s and was with men till maybe 35, and then I had a relationship with a woman for about 4 or 5 years, and then since then I've just really seen myself as just really having equal kind of preference for men and women. And for me, that it doesn't really matter. The gender doesn't really matter.
You're fluid.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm trying hard to keep up with all the lingo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm fluid. Thanks for giving me the label. Now I know what to say.
Hey, don't label me. I'm fluid. I'll just float right out of here.
I don't want that fluid label either.
So you were in India working on a documentary called Carmageddon, about the car industry and the car population and pollution in India. Do you think you will go back to making that film, Carmageddon, that documentary?
No, definitely not. I mean, I was making a film about cars in India because what I found fascinating is that it's such an extreme. There are such extremes of wealth and poverty in India, and there were so many people driving not so many, but there were Rolls Royces and Lamborghinis, and then obviously people walking and riding bicycles. And I was just struck by the incredible extremes there. And I kind of put this in the film at the beginning about how I was making a film about it, which I was doing, because I thought it was really funny how on one time you're making a film about cars as a sort of political, a film about the politics of the stratas of society, which is very kind of, it was almost like a sort of macho kind of, very, climate change and all that sort of thing. And then to go from that to making a film or looking after your uncle,
Mm-hmm.
I liked that that juxtaposition of, going from kind of being macho. Well, all my friends would say, Simon, there's not much chance of you being macho, but but to sort of talking about cars and then going from that to being a carer.
So the film Much Ado About Dying, it's doing the film festival circuit scene right now. How will the general public be able to see this documentary at some point? Are you hoping that like a Netflix or something will pick it up?
I would love that. I mean, I'm sure at some point somebody will pick it up. I don't know if they'll have much in Canada, but I'm not sure where it will show. But we're trying to get it out there. So, people just keep your eyes open, really. There may be some other festivals that will take it. So it might get on Netflix, might get on Mubi or Hulu or one of these. One.
Some sort of a streaming service. So Simon, what do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen your documentary Much Ado About Dying?
Okay, so people don't get paid to care for a family member. They're looking after somebody themselves, and it's a very invisible, unthanked thing to do. It's sort of undervalued. And so one of the wonderful things about the screening so far is that people come out and they want to talk about how they care about, how they're caring for somebody. At the first screening we ever did it, which was in Amsterdam, a woman nearly knocked me off my feet on her bicycle, and she screeched to a halt and said, "I've got to give you a big hug." And she said, she was a 60-year-old woman. "I'm a carer for my mum." And she said, at dinner parties, people will say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And she'll say, "Oh, I've been looking after my mum for 10 years. And she says, people tap her on the shoulder and sort of go, "Good for you," and then turn and talk to somebody else because they think it's not interesting and it's sort of not valued. And so I think one of the great things about this film is that people have come away sort of feeling, there's a kind of cathartic side to watching the film. And people are starting to talk about caring for their elderly relatives. And so that's been great. And then the other question is, it raises a question of, well, what do we do? How do we as a society care for all our elderly people? And then also particularly as well, how do LGBTQ people, when they get older, who looks after them? And so I hope that it raises some of those questions. But to be perfectly honest with you, Mark, my biggest, the thing I want people to go away with most is I want them to come away and feel that they've been moved in some way, because that's what, as filmmakers, that's what we want to do. We want to move our audiences, and we want them to laugh and to cry and to
ruin their makeup.
Exactly. So I want to ruin people's makeup.
Indeed. I have to say, Simon, thank you so much for your time. Well said, well done, well filmed, well made. And I believe you won a Best Director award for this documentary.
That was a bit of a shock. Yeah, that was a bit of a shock. That was in Amsterdam at the premiere of the film. And so...
how does that make you feel?
Helping.
Best Director award.
It was a shock. And I'm very pleased. I'm pleased that it meant that, people obviously found the film incredibly moving. And it made me feel I'm doing something right in my filmmaking. So that was great, yeah.
Well done. Well done. Thanks again for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Lovely to chat with you, Mark. Thank you. Bye-bye.
When life's good, it's very, very good. When it's bad, it's horrid.
What do you do if your uncle says he's dying and you're the only person in the world that can look after him?
I'm just saying, I think it's OTT to buy 4 of everything.
Don't think like that.
Have you got any more of these big ones, please?
1, 2, 3, 4 is OTT, be careful. But if you go 6, 7, then you're buying too much stuff. Ooh, that was my finger.
It wasn't.
Bossy uncle and
bossy nephew.
And bossy nephew, absolutely. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
What do you do when you're dragged into a mess that's exactly like the Shakespeare plays that he used to act in?
Which of you, shall we say, doth love us most?
I'm a bubbly person.
And he wants to give his kingdom away to a hot anthropology student he's fallen in love with.
He received £25,000 from you.
I'm intuitional about money. I don't really think of figures.
Everyone!
Why was I always the boring one, standing at the edge, never doing anything right?
Because everybody keeps saying, put him in a home, put him in a home.
I know they do.
And you don't want to be in a home.
Nor do I need to be in a home.
And then King Lear had his storm.
Death. It's like going on the most wonderful holiday without any of the bother of packing.
Much Ado About Dying is currently doing the film festival circuit scene, but keep a lookout for this powerful and moving documentary, Much Ado About Dying.
Bill 7, to ban discrimination in employment, government services, and housing, based on a person's sexual orientation, was up for a vote at Queen's Park. Most NDP and Liberal MPPs supported the bill, but without some progressive Conservative legislators backing, a divisive split could rack the province. 4 PCs decided to break party ranks to vote with their conscience and support Bill 7. Cabinet Minister and MPP Dennis Timbrell did it to show solidarity for his beloved brother, the well-known drag queen Rusty Ryan. And for me, a gay politician who was not yet out, I had to take a stand. We were known as the Gang of 4. I'm former Cabinet Minister and MPP Phil Gillies. The date, December 2nd, 1986, when LGBT rights came to Ontario.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.com, where everything is connected, and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, check out the socials at Mark Tara. The podcast is available on all major platforms. And finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, we are living in days of making dreams come true. So believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you.
Hi, I'm Justin Ling, author of Missing from the Village. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.